Hi everyone and welcome to Over the Rainbow Show with your host Bob Brown on Friday the 4th of August 2017 at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 12 o'clock Pacific Time and 8 p.m. UK time. And to all the listeners from around the world, the number to ring the show is 323-902-5497. From the UK, 001-323-902-5497. 5497. Now you can go to Beacon of Light Radio chat on Facebook, or you can Skype me at Beacon Light Radio. Well, my guest tonight, I think I had her on my show in 2014. I think it was. It's quite a few years ago. I think she was on the early shows. God, that's going back some time. Well, my guest today is Hillary. I don't know if it's Ramiro or Ramiro. He's an award-winning photographer, 13 years alternative radio as well. She's a producer, founder of Yin Radio TV, artist and founder of Love Breathe for Earth. Excuse me. And 2 years project dedicated to human love, meditation and nature, author of the 2 books of According to the Unknown of Money Matters and For Mind, Body and Spirit. Can we please welcome Hillary to the show? Hello, Hillary.
Hi, Bob. It's great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. You know, I know the listeners won't know a lot about you. Can you just give us a bit of introduction about yourself?
Sure. Well, I've been in alternative radio for 13 years as a host and as a producer. I founded Yin Radio TV a couple years ago as a result of wanting to offer a channel that gives a broad spectrum of different information. And once I founded the channel, I brought in a bunch of different hosts and helped produce shows and get new talent, new voices out there. And we've been very successful at that. We have a channel on YouTube. And, online seems to be the new way to go. I have a background in terrestrial radio in upstate New York in the United States. And eventually found my way to online radio, worked for Achieve Radio for many years. That's my main network that I worked with for most of the time I was on the air. And a couple different alternative networks here and there that popped up. Some are still around, some have disappeared and gone away. But overall, I believe I was one of the first female voices in the alternative movement when it first started in the early 2000s. And being a female in the industry has been really interesting. And when Alex Jones started, everybody knows him for the most part. I was, kind of getting on the new train ride then too. So Alex happened to go into a different direction with more conspiratorial government stuff. And people really seem to enjoy that. And I went in the other direction of alternative information, all the way from, health information, healing information, technology information. So over the years, I spent a lot of time talking to different people from different backgrounds once a week. Learned a lot, but had a great time, traveled, did a lot of things. And I'm a Reiki practitioner. I'm a master teacher in Usui and Karuna Reiki. I had a very successful practice in the early 2000s, mid-2000s. I taught a lot of students who went off into the world and did great things. And, after raising my kids and seeing them off into the world and still helping my youngest get there, it became really clear to me that this was such a passion that I just really loved it. But I needed to step away because I feel very strongly that a lot of the alternative radio stuff has become very convoluted. And, a lot of the new talent in the industry spends a lot of time distracted with things when they could be really doing a lot of other things, I think, that would be of more use to the human existence. So I wanted to step away. I'm also an artist. I've been painting and working on collections since 2014, probably since we last spoke. and building myself through actually expressing myself spiritually through my artwork and learning to work with different teachers, different styles, has been a real beautiful process for me. I've really enjoyed it. Showed my work in New York, won a couple awards. I've really kind of happened really fast. In fact, this year is really the first year that everything's been recognized, but it's been building for a few years. So I've been completing collections. I have about a 60-piece collection at this point. But anyway, so the artist thing started out kind of as a hobby, but then it built into kind of a passion when I started Love Breathe for Earth in 2014, which was a project that incorporated gathering global, getting people together globally to do a day of meditation and honoring the earth. And over the course of 2 years, I organized 13 events, which were very successful. We had people joining in from all over the world. And I used to keep track of which cities people would offer up where they were coming in from or where they were tuning in from. And I would mark that out on a big world map. And then I would paint the abstract design of that onto very large canvases. So I created 13 large canvases that represent each of those meditations. And everybody who participated in those meditations had a part to play in the design of these canvases. And they'll be going on exhibit in the next, I think 2019, we're going to put them up. So I've been very busy with that, which is great because it keeps me very focused and very happy.
I can imagine it does. When you're painting and spiritualism comes into it, does it help with what you're going to paint?
Well, I would think so. But see, what happens, the artistic process is a really wonderful thing, and I wish more people talked about it because it allows a person to gain access to the creative energies, to the creative field, and everybody can do that differently and explain it differently. Well, my process, I kind of do everything backwards. I've discovered 44 years of my life, I do everything backwards. So I had the experience, the spiritual awakening growth happen early on in my life because I sought it out. And I sought it out because I was having very intense experiences in my meditations, and I felt like I needed teachers. And so I got on that path, and I found my way to different people and worked with them for amounts of time and gained insight and some wisdom early on in my life. And now I feel like, well, maybe I should get a career. Everybody does it the opposite way. They do the work, they raise the family, then they have their spiritual awakening later on in life. Well, I kind of did it backwards, although I was raising my family early on too. So the process for me is a spiritual process, but it's also a result of synchronicity. It's a result of my ability to be very flexible and spontaneous in whatever it is. And I tend to create on astrologically relevant timing. And this is a personal choice that I made a long time ago when I started the Love Breathe for Earth project, because what I was doing is helping coordinate these meditations based on eclipse cycles or moon cycles to get people to wake up to the fact that astrology is a great way to realign yourself to natural time versus man-made time, the Gregorian calendar, for example. And so in an effort to help promote or foster an understanding of that through my own learning and wanting to pass that on, but not come out quite as like a, teacher, I've organized these things on relevant days. So what I would do is paint on most of those days too. So I would create a project or take a photograph of something wherever I was. For a while I traveled and went to different places to experience these different meditations. I went to Egypt. We did a Love Breathe for Earth meditation inside the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid. There were 3 of us. I was in England for one. I was in Louisiana down at the Poverty Point Mounds for another. So over these, and actually we did one at 9/11 Memorial as well. And I took a water sample from the fountain the day of the meditation, and I partnered with Masaru in Japan to do the crystal photography. So I sent the water sample from the global meditation, and so that started a little side journey of 3 in total experiments that worked with the crystalline structure of the water and current events. And sure enough, what showed up in one of the water crystalline photographs that they took in Japan was the actual 9/11 event, down to where the planes hit the tower.
Oh.
I haven't published this yet, but I have the photographs. I have the whole experiment. I have everything. I've just been kind of waiting for the right time, because it feels to me, my track record has been, I always kind of get in touch with these concepts a little prior to everybody being really ready for them. And it has been a double-edged sword, so to speak, because sometimes I'm not successful in some of the things I do because people aren't ready for it, or the material is just a little too far out there.
Yeah.
But then, you give it a few years and then you revisit it, and all of a sudden everybody's like, oh yeah, that's great. And, the abundance pours in, and it's so, I've noticed that about myself. So I'm waiting for the right time to publish these water experiments that happened in the course of the Love Breathe for Earth project, and share them with the world, because they really do show really clearly that traumatic experiences live on in the water memory. We did, when I say we, I'm talking about me and the people that I'm working with at the time.
Yes.
I collected a water sample at Sandy Hook Elementary School. And if you probably recall, because you probably heard about this over there, the year that all the 20 kids were murdered in this school shooting, yes. And it was right around Christmas, and it really went viral. Okay, so I wanted to question, how do these events that go viral, that gets exposed to millions of people's consciousness, affect the water in our bodies? If they have an effect in the water on site, on the land, then is it possible for us to emanate the same effect within the body, the water content in the body? So this was the conversation with Dr. Emoto about before he died, because I was one of the last experiments that he did before he passed away, and then I worked with his son. And this was the conversation taking place. And some of the conversations were fascinating, and the ideas we're pondering were absolutely mind expanding. And I'm just waiting for the right time to publish it. I just, I'm kind of the kind of person who waits for signs and confirmation and things to happen in that sense. And I haven't received the confirmation yet to put that out there. And maybe it's not my job to. Maybe I'm supposed to do it.
I'm sure you will do. The signs will be there. When you're doing some of these paintings, our thought is, have you ever thought about putting a tape or something like music to your artwork, or talking about your artwork, pressing something on your paintings?
I have. In fact, I have it's just putting it together as an event. Where I get kind of, I don't know yet if I should do this, is when I think about the construct of that. Should it be a podcast? Should it be a conversation in the room with people? I mean, I've been in this world of digital etheric reach for over a decade, and sometimes I feel like you lose the personal exchange, that spark exchange, when you're just talking to the air, even though there's plenty of people listening and you have an audience and so on and so forth. I really would love to do it in a setting, the right kind of setting, and I just haven't decided what kind of right setting that is. So for now, no, I haven't done it, but I will be giving an artist tour in Scotland in April of next year. And I will be taking a small group of people, I'm limiting it to 8 people, around the entire country. And we'll be going to some of the most beautiful places in the country to do photography work, to do some plein air painting. And I will be giving some casual talks along the way for that, talking about reflective photography, things of that sort, and teaching some of my techniques. But I don't feel like I'm really ready to do the teaching thing yet for the artwork. But I do have people coming to me and asking me, and there is interest. And so I'm letting it unfold, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course it does. Yeah, yeah. It was an idea I thought of years ago, and I kept thinking, but I think it will be. I think in the future, I think that's the way to go as well with your artwork. Susan's in the chat room, says, Hillary, is there a way we can view your artwork? I would love to see it.
Yes.
Have you got a
Wow,
website?
that's great.
She
I
might be able to
do.
put a
In fact,
website in the chat room.
sure. It's HillaryRamo.com. It's my name. You can go there, and it will give you links to everything that I've talked about. It'll give you links to the Yin Radio TV. It will give you links to the Love Breathe for Earth. It will give you links to my artwork. You can find it and view it on there. I'm also on Fine Art America. You can find some of my pieces on there as well. My exhibit pieces, my award-winning pieces aren't posted, but you can go to my blog, which you can find on my website, and you can scroll through some of the archives this past year, and you'll be able to find a really good example of the work that I've put on exhibit and the ones that have won awards.
How did you get into art then? Have you always done artwork when you were at school, or was it later?
How do you get into art? I don't know. Artwork is well, yes, I do remember, actually. Thanks for bringing this up. Well, I was on a holiday with my sister, and I took her to Cape Cod in 2014. And we spent the weekend in a family friend's home. And we had this glorious night under the stars one night. Her and I just sat out on the beach talking sister talk until late in the night. And we were watching the stars, and we were watching all the things going on, and we had this glorious conversation. So we walked back to the house, and I went to sleep, and I had a dream. And in the dream, this very clear voice said, "You have to paint." And I woke up the next morning, and I came downstairs for coffee, and I said to my sister and the family friend, and I said, "Guess what? I had this dream. It said you have to paint." At the time, I didn't even know how to go buy paints. I couldn't even tell you. I couldn't even tell you what brushes to use. I had no skills whatsoever. But it was such a clear message through the dream that I could not ignore it. And being who I am, I knew it was important, and I just said, well, I can't ignore this, and I can't pretend like it's such a big shock either, because this sort of stuff happens all the time. So I had to come back to New York and find a teacher, and I did. And I worked with him for about 2 years, and he brought it out of me. I mean, I owe what I do now to him. And he's an abstract painter, and he does a lot of phenomenal work, and I've known him since he was 14. So believe it or not, our paths have crossed since he was a young kid, and I never in a million years thought I'd be working with him professionally like that. So he agreed to teach, and the first lesson was taking me to the craft store to teach me how to buy paints, because I had to say to him, "Can you please take me to the store and teach me what to buy?" How humbling and embarrassing could that possibly be to somebody, right? And yeah. I don't think if I had known him as well as I knew him, I would have been able to ask that. But I knew I had to ask that, so I probably would have asked anybody that. And he did. And he took me to the art store, and he showed me which paints were better than others and why, and which brushes. And I got my foundational tools together, and the rest is history, really. And he started me on big canvases. I'll never forget the first time I walked into the studio, and he had a huge canvas pinned up against the wall. And I just looked at it like, what? You expect me to fill that space? But I did, and he broke the shell. And I owe him a lot for that. And he was a phenomenal teacher.
Do you do abstract paintings then as well? Do you?
I do abstract, and I do landscape painting.
I was going to say, because abstract is good for spiritual as well. It fetches more into it.
Well, I like it. Yeah, I like it, Bob, because the abstract and the detailed oil, I've been working with a master oil teacher for the last year. Her name is Karen Wooden here in New York. And she's been teaching me how to do oil. And oil landscape painting is much different than abstract painting, as we all know, and it actually works both different sides of the brain. So it took me a long time. It took me a long time to kind of switch from doing abstract work to doing fine, detailed landscape work, because my brain wanted to do, larger abstract, blur the colors, and who cares if it looks like a leaf, right? So no oil master painter wants to work with somebody who can't switch, because, but then again, there's some brilliance and genius in that too, because it's always the one who doesn't necessarily follow all the rules that breaks new ground. So I have great respect for both mediums, and I enjoy both mediums, and I actually haven't put my oil paintings up yet. They've only been in one exhibit, and that was a full exhibit of all my artwork, and I haven't put them anywhere else or really posted them online, so it's kind of a collection that I haven't really shared yet, but I will someday, I'm sure.
How did you get into spiritualism as well? All different people come in different ways. How did you get into it then?
Into spiritualism?
Yeah.
Well, my grandfather was a psychic before the internet. He worked a full professional life, worked for the Peace Corps administration, lived in Peru and Guatemala. My mother was raised there for most of her childhood life. And when they came back to the States, he had always been very intuitive and really just wanted to work in that realm. So he switched careers. And, when I was about 5 or 6, he taught me how to do meditation, and we had a lot of fun with it. And he did a past life regression with me when I was 5. And I remember I met my parents from a past life. They were 2 country farmers, and they lived in the country, which was very similar to upstate New York or England. And I always felt that it was English countryside. And when I went to London for the first time in 2009, I realized very quickly that what I had remembered when I was 5 was definitely the countryside in England. And I, even down to remembering my cat that I had in that lifetime. And I remembered that I had died young as a child. So it was this really interesting influence, just this emotional thing that happened when I was a child. And so I always knew there was something else to life than the typical kid, I guess. And I grew up with this awareness of this other realm of existence. And so I always had I was always drawn to that kind of work, that kind of material. I read a lot about it growing up. He taught me how to do tarot cards before he died, and gave me his deck. And so I've always had them, and I always pull for friends and stuff. I have people come over and, oh, can you pull me some cards? And, oh, yeah, sure. And then it just always turns into an amazing thing. And when I started consulting, I've done intuitive consulting for a long time as well. I turned it into a profession that wasn't just New Age hoo-hooey stuff. People can sometimes wrap their minds around that language, but I always found, because I did go into the corporate world for a while, I did work in real estate and insurance, and I always found that, if you can change the dialogue or language into something somebody can understand, you will always be better off, right? And it's really meeting people where they're at. So spiritualism came into my life young, but I didn't know it was spiritualism at the time. And then when I finished college and went into my young adult life, I started to be pulled to shamanism. So I sought out teachers. The first one of mine was Vera Lopez, who took me to Peru while I was 5 months pregnant with my youngest son. And she's Bolivian. And we had an extraordinary experience when we traveled through the country. And that really opened me up in a million different ways. And so that's what really started it. And then I started to work with traditional and non-traditional teachers and reading lots of books. And then the radio show transpired out of all that work. So spiritualism started with me when I was pretty young. But then again, I didn't know it was that until I got older.
Yeah, I don't know if you've got children or not. Would you encourage them to go into that world?
My kids? Well, yeah. My oldest son took the full Reiki training when he was 10, and that was by choice. So he's actually a certified master teacher and was at 11 years old. And he hasn't done anything with it, but I know he uses the concepts, and I know that so what the take I take with my kids is kind of like a spiritual parenting stance, if you will. Not a religious parenting stance, two totally different things, but more of a spiritual, flexible, open-end, unconditional love, providing safe boundaries, working through the challenges, and making it a whole family type experience instead of, I see a lot of some friends, some people talk to me, my clients will talk to me about how difficult it is to parent sometimes, how there's so much disconnection. And now with the technology infuses into our life, especially within the last decade, it's become even harder to get children into an authentic space of connection with another human being because they have their devices. And I know that I had told you I wanted to talk about this on the show because this is probably becoming one of the biggest social experiments ever to be put on the human population before. Never have we had the ability to communicate from one spot on the planet to, halfway around the world before, instantaneously. And I think the invention of the internet has sparked a radical change in human consciousness that has both positive and negative attributes. The positive being we can now connect in ways we've never connected before. And so maybe my path for the last 10 years being on the internet, because I'm from the generation that grew up without it, and it has speeded me up. It's a quickening in many ways. And in a spiritual quickening, when they talk about spiritual quickening, it usually refers to the kind of leap in consciousness that we make from one point to another, having had an experience or some kind of aha, revelationary moment. And when we have these moments, it creates a quickening in consciousness where suddenly concepts become clearer, thoughts become clearer, things that we wouldn't normally perhaps have thought or perceived as connected are. And we're able to have a glimpse into a higher intellect, and I hate the word higher because it really lacks in describing what this is. Because when you say the word higher, you're thinking something's lower automatically, right? So when you think bad thoughts or you have a bad day or you're really emotional, well, I'm not in higher consciousness, I'm failing. I hate that, honestly. I think that should be just stricken right out of the record because these lower moments are what make the necessary catalyst, it's a catalyst. It's a kind of friction that creates a thought or energy or however you want to describe it that cooks your necessary ingredients to a certain level where you then make the connections and things. So it's kind of a necessary part of the process. It's like painting. You have to do an underpainting in your oil scene sometimes, right? And the the underpainting is sometimes just this blob of light and dark. And then you put in all the other stuff and then it makes sense once you start to see the scene come out. Well, the underpainting can be very difficult or it can be very easy so life is like an underpainting. You can be experiencing challenges and difficult times or pain, and you think that the New Age industry has put this disgusting blame on people who can't, who have these experiences like they're doing something wrong, and they've created this whole culture of spiritual guilt or spiritual judgment on other people. Oh, you have cancer. Oh, you're sick. Or, oh, this is happening, so therefore you must not be as enlightened. Or you're in a dark stage. Or they act like you have scabies and they can't come near you because your energy will affect them. I think they've been scammed in that. Because to say that somebody else going through the dark night is in a bad place is ignorant on their part, or they've never had a dark night moment themselves. And until a person goes through that, I don't think they're really aligned with their true purpose yet. So you can learn, you can go to workshops, you can read books, you can listen to podcasts, you can do the work, right? But if you haven't done that work, you're really not there yet. And that's okay, because wherever you're at on your path is perfectly fine, and there is no judgment, and everybody's doing it in their own way, and they're accessing the same primordial soup that our consciousness has access to. All of us have the ability to do it. It's just that every single person is like their own individual galaxy. And the planets that they have created in their own individual galaxy belong to them. And that gravitational force is how they operate, and that's where they're at. And we should respect that as a completely beautiful thing. So, we had a major change in leadership here in the United States, as you know, Bob.
Yeah, I do.
We have Trump come in, right? And I watched it through different eyes. I have a unique perspective, I think. Because when I try to talk about this, I anger a lot of people. So I'm just warning everybody listening, try to listen to what I'm going to say without getting caught up in your hate or judgment of him. I watched his campaign, him and Hillary, from the start, because I was working on a book proposal for the 9 Dots Prize through Cambridge University. And their question for the proposal contest was, does technology make politics impossible? So all the book proposals that were coming in had to be based on that simple question. Well, it's not very simple, but that question. So as I'm watching the campaigns, I'm watching it from that perspective. How are they each using technology? How is social media affecting the vibe? How are we going into this campaign with the media? What is the media portraying? I've watched this like a hawk through this whole time, not getting caught up in the, oh my God, he's such a bad person, or Hillary's such a jerk, blah, blah, blah. By the way, it was really hard to be named Hillary through Hillary's campaign. People either really loved me or really hated me every time. What's your name? Hillary. Right. Yeah. So Trump went on to the Alex Jones show early on in his campaign. And I found this really fascinating and interesting because I'm in the alternative media. And I wondered, one, what the booking process was like for that. Whose idea was it? Did they approach him, or did he approach Trump? And Roger Stone was involved in the whole coordinating of that, which, if you know anything about Roger Stone, please, all of you listening, Google Roger Stone. You'll know that there's some pretty heavy-duty stuff going on here. So when he went on Alex Jones' show, the fact that he even got on there really was quite the eye-opener to me. But what Trump did was he talked the talk to the millions of listeners of Alex Jones' show, and He spoke the anti-government speak, and he ignited all of that sleeping slumber audience in the United States. And everybody came out of the woodwork, and everybody who's been listening to Alex Jones for a decade, everybody who's got the conspiratorial anti-government bug was ignited. And I really believe that's what won him the election. Because I went to see...
I'm going to say that's probably why they got him to go on Alex Jones' show.
Right. So the whole reason Trump went on Alex Jones' show, and I truly believe this, was to access those voters. Nobody else has ever done that. None, Democrat, Republican, none of them have ever come on to an alternative media show. That's why it was so fascinating to me. That's why it was so interesting. I'm like, hey, God, I feel like standing on the top of my house going, oh, my God, do you guys see what's happening? He's going on Alex Jones, and he's speaking the talk, and then he spent the rest of the campaign talking the talk. And I actually wanted to see it from my own eyes. So when I live in Albany, New York, upstate New York. When he came to Albany to do a rally at the Times Union Center, I went down to watch it. And there were maybe about 30, 40 protesters kind of roped off in a little section of across the street, very, very peaceful. They weren't causing any problems. They just had picket signs. And there were hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands of people just going into this arena, there were Black people, white people, Hispanic people, men, women, children, teenagers. I mean, everybody was there, Bob. And I went up to the very, very top, the very last top high nosebleed seat I could find. And I videotaped the whole thing, and I listened to everything, and I watched the energy in it. I watched people listening, and people were really listening to him. You know, you had one heckler jump up in the middle of all the cameras and make sure he was seen on the cameras, and they escorted him out peacefully. And then on the far end of the event, the next day, the newspapers were reporting that the protesters were there in vast numbers. So they had a big picture of all these thousands of people piling in, and they used the word protesters show up. So the perception in the media to the reader who wasn't there was that this mob of people, which literally were not there to protest, were perceived as protesters. And I really feel that the media began its campaign against Trump way on early on in the campaign. And Hillary was doing the very old school, old boys club type campaigning that really is just outdated and nobody can relate to anymore. And, you know, every time I watched her on TV, it was like you were watching a robot, just regurgitating everything her publicist told her to tell.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So the rally he made a lot of sense, and he talked about things that are true. You know, he talked about China, he talked about the different countries, the way the capitalism was working worldwide, which is not something everybody understands. I mean, it takes a pretty educated person to understand how international business works, how international treaties work, the contractual law that puts all of these things into effect, and all the little ride-ons and riders and amendments that get added to these things. Unless you really understand that, you're going to have a hard time following the stories, and then you're just going to jump on board with whatever flavored, tainted thing the media gives you. So I watched the whole thing through the media campaign. I watched the energy of it, the wording, the manipulation. And when he was elected, I really wasn't surprised because I really believe that him going on the Alex Jones show in the very beginning of the campaign was his golden ticket. So
Yeah,
alternative media helped him get into, not Russia. Russia didn't do it.
No.
The worldwide and American audience of alternative media changed the leadership in this country. And I would really appreciate it if somebody in mainstream media would recognize that and say that instead of sitting here saying, well, he just got elected because of, Putin and Russia. And no, sorry, that's not true. He got elected because the people of this country have become so aware and in the loop of alternative information and alternative capitalism and politics, and we know how things work. And thanks to people like Alex Jones and I think David Icke and myself and other people who have been in the industry, we have given quality information out for over a decade now, and we are seeing the effects of that in the fact that leadership has changed. So I don't have millions of listeners per se, right? But Alex Jones does. So it shows that he's an influencer, but he's an influencer that comes from the alternative media world. Now, whatever you think about him or where he comes from, I mean, that's a whole nother show. But it does give credit to the fact that alternative media people are listening because of the digital world, because it's become easier to turn your computer on or turn your app on and listen to shows like this. People don't want to sit down and watch the 6 o'clock news like robots every single night because you're just spoon-fed propaganda.
Of course it is, yeah. It's media talking and it's money making than the papers.
Well, we all have to make money, but I think we need to make money in a different way now, which is exactly where this is going. If you look at the big money people, the people who own Amazon, PayPal, if you watch the direction digital currency is taking, I invest in digital currency. I watch the market. I am wide open. My eyes are wide open when I look at this stuff. I can see what's happening, and we're really looking at having to change the way the whole setup of the capitalistic world is. Does it mean that we have to go in the direction of all these old, outdated leaders think we should go? No, I think it's time for new leaders to step up.
Yes.
We need a change of leadership all around the world. We need a change of how the political system works everywhere. We need a change of the banking system. We need a change of the energy system. Recently, I just started to work with a local solar farm who is building and getting ready to launch next year, where you can hook up to a solar community farm, and you don't need solar panels on your house. You don't even need to be a homeowner. You can hook up your electricity, your use of electricity through as a renter, right? If you don't have a house that's primed for panels, you don't face the right direction, your roof's not in good condition, you don't want to, well, you don't have to now, because solar community farms are starting to pop up, and I think this is really innovative, and this is what we need. Because the system, the grid, doesn't care where your energy comes from, it just needs your energy, right? It's like a giant pulsating entity. And it doesn't care if you get your energy from oil, or if you get your energy from solar. And so I switched over. I've gotten a bunch of people to switch over, to sign up. It's local to where I live, but I know there's other projects around the country and the globe going for the same thing. If we can hook up our energy use to clean energy, aren't we doing a better thing for the planet? Isn't it just a better way to be? Yeah. And I think instead of talking about certain things in that realm, as far as energy goes, we're really missing the point. We really need to get on board with hooking everybody up to a cleaner kind of energy, because climate change is, it's a cycle. I mean, any geologist can look you in the eye and tell you that, unless they're being paid to not tell you that. And it's a cycle that happens on a regular basis, something we can actually count on. And as far back as we've been keeping count, we have been able to track extinction cycles. We've been able to track how the sun is affecting the earth. I mean, there's very real updated science that supports these things. And in the alternative science world, like Maurice Cortell, he's a phenomenal person when it comes to offering alternative scientific methods and ideas. And I think we really need to open up the floor to people who have new ideas, new concepts, speak from an intuitive side of their brain, and can start to really put these things together. I love to explore quantum physics. I love to explore the world of particles and physics, because as an intuitive, I'm actually able to see and ask really good questions as to why is this going on? Why is this happening? Because I'm not trained in the science world, right? So I'm not trained in classical physics or any other kind of physics, but yet I can look at the material and pull out something or ask a question that can actually trigger a train of thought through a physicist's mind. I mean, I've actually face-to-face had conversations with some. And I think as I grow older and, coming into my own now in my 40s, I feel like that's kind of what my purpose is to ask the good questions so that the trickle-down awakening consciousness part can open up just in the pondering even, right? And anyway, you're going to get me on a tangent. I'll never stop talking. but I'm a better guest than I am a host. That's what I've come down to.
Yeah. Is the human species ever going to change?
I hope so. I have faith. Yeah. I mean, look how far we've come. We just have to make a choice, Bob. We have to make a choice. Are we going to use our superpowers for good or evil? Right? Are we going to use our superpowers to manipulate people, con them out of their money and time? Are we going to use it for good, where we seek enlightened conversation for the benefit of both people or whoever's sitting in the room? Are we going to put our energy and efforts into real change? Or are we just going to sit around talking about it all the time? I mean, how much effect does a post on Facebook really have? I think it has a lot. sometimes I have my days where I'm like, what is this social media thing all for? It's just a big, thing to track us and to socially profile us and find some way to market us a product, because what it comes down to in the very simple terms most of the time is anything you do online is mostly tracked to sell you something. Right? I mean, in a digital age, they're not going to be able to, the malls are closing. I don't know what you call them over there, but, here you have, hard stores shutting down, and you have people just doing everything online now. So everything you do online is trackable. And a couple of years ago, I was writing a lot about the deep web and the Silk Road, and using that as an example of free market, and how the untrackability, I don't even know if that's a real word, it just sounded good in the moment, the untrackability of the Silk Road market was really a test run. And when the government broke into the Silk Road and stole all the Bitcoin out of there and arrested the guy who took the fall for the whole thing, which I think he's innocent, then all of a sudden 5 or 6 of the same kind of prototype markets popped up in the dark web. Okay, so you had government officials who stole the Bitcoin out of the working model. They allowed it to run because clearly they were able to get into it at any time, so they were studying it, right? And then they popped up 5 or 6 more of their own markets and started an underground drug world. And the drug world is where most people in power make their money, believe it or not. So they, when you talk about the dark web, you're the surface web, what we're used to, Google, Yahoo, Facebook, everything that you kind of go on there for shopping, whatever, is only 4% of the web. So that means when you put something into the search bar, you're only searching the accessible 4% of the web of information. Now, if you think about that, that's an extremely low amount, right? So how can we even trust the information that we get off of the web, because it's monitored, it's edited, it's access denied. Some countries don't even let you get onto certain websites. It's just very much controlled. The Bush administration, the Obama administration, and now the Trump administration have all allowed this to happen. Ever since 9/11, we have begun the process of moving into a kind of world where everything is done online. Hillary Clinton was a big promoter of putting healthcare records into the digital world. I mean, she tried to pull that off when the Clintons were in office. She did everything she could to get Obama to sign that into law. Now Trump is trying to reverse that. Why? Because everything you do in your own personal medical life is trackable. It can be accessed from the outside. It can be accessed by law officials. It can be accessed by government. It can be accessed by hackers. And we're seeing that as, medical facilities are hacked and then, held ransom for Bitcoin. So when you talk about Bitcoin, and there's lots of other different kinds of digital currencies. There's Ethereum, there's Zcash, there's all different kinds of things. They all work off of a blockchain technology. The blockchain technology recently, this past week, split for Bitcoin. It went into Bitcoin Cash and it went into regular Bitcoin. What that means is that they're creating a better digital currency that's trackable. So you can only really, the government's only going to let you go really, so long before they pull the plug on something like this, because they want to know where your money's going. And digital currency allows the transactions to happen between individuals. You don't need a bank. So if you don't need a bank, the banks are out of money. If you don't need a bank, then the banks are going to become obsolete. Well, the banks make lots of money, and so do the banking families and the Fed. And again, I refer to Alex Jones and all of his work to reveal, the corruption and the dysfunction of these systems, right? So, Trump is speaking to all of those people who know that information. So who's going to get behind digital currency? People who don't trust banks, people who don't trust the government, people who don't want third-party interference in their financial transactions. So the current split this week where Bitcoin went off and Bitcoin Cash was created, Bitcoin Cash, I predict, will become better sustainable. It'll be a more predominantly accepted currency. And because it's more trackable, it will be more sellable to government agencies and businesses and that such. So I think we're really, really watching the birth of the New World Order, but not in the sense that perhaps the doom and gloom aspect has been sold across the line. We're talking about the New World Order as far as a different way to produce, a different way to spend money, a different way to function. And the digital world, we're really living in a digital age now, because if you look at a child who's been born within this time frame, they're growing up with a completely different set of reality points than we did. Okay? I mean, my sons are dating, right? And they're dating in a digital age, and everything is displayed for everybody to see. And if you have a fight, you include that fight on Twitter and everywhere else, and all the kids are doing it. All the kids are using Twitter, Snapchat, the different platforms to express themselves.
Right. It's is it alien technology then we're using?
Well, it's a good question, and that's one I asked you to ask me. And here's why. Because as a radio host in the early 2000s, I did a few years of interviewing some of the big, more predominant researchers in ufology, and including Phil Corso Jr. I had several shows with him. They were very, very highly well received. The thing I have a problem with, though, is that Roswell always seems to be the starting point for most ufologists. Okay, anytime somebody pumps out a couple books or maybe a lot of books, they always kind of just go back to Roswell and they start from there. If you talk to any indigenous culture about UFOs, they don't even consider them UFOs, because that means unidentified flying object. They know who they are. They call them the star beings. And most of the researchers that I've interviewed, some of them early on in their career, I've watched them grow over the years. Some of them were already very well established when I talked to them. Nobody wants to talk about the indigenous cultures because they don't sell the aliens are evil product. Every modern-day ufology person who does this kind of work either has a doom and gloom, they are bad, we need to protect ourselves from them, or they have kind of a hidden secret, don't really want to talk about it publicly, thought or opinion that these may be things that are better for us, or they may be beings that are coming to help. Some people talk about that, but most people don't. And if you even watch the predictive programming in Hollywood over the last decade, they've done a lot of alien movies that have come out, and they're all us against them.
Yes.
Right? So the mainstream message is aliens are coming and they're bad, and we better prepare, and the military is going to save us. That's the basic message in most Hollywood blockbuster hits. And we all know how many millions and millions and millions of people get exposed to these things. And so anytime a blockbuster movie comes out, you can pretty much watch that knowing what is going to be the general flow or take of opinion. And I noticed as I was in my radio career, a lot of these big researchers would suddenly appear out of nowhere and have 12 books put together. And you have to kind of wonder how that's possible. I mean, I have a hard time getting 2 out. I don't know.
No, you're right.
I don't know. I mean, maybe writing 18 books in a year is possible, but I don't know. I've never done it, and I don't think I could possibly do that. But, hey, kudos to them if it is. I really don't think it is, though. I think it's disinformation. I think it's people coming into the industry to mislead. And then you watch Ancient Aliens, you watch this show that has become mainstream, and the ratings have been really great, and they're doing so well, and they're all successful. And I've interviewed probably 80% of the people on there, And I just don't buy it anymore. How can every single thing that they cover be alien related? It feels like it's just been bought out. They've sold out, and they're just doing it for ratings, and it's a successful show, and everybody gets famous when they go on it, and kudos to them. I think it's irresponsible. I think it's irresponsible for a show that gets that kind of mainstream, attention to put information out that is questionable and misleading, and I don't think they do a very good job of being a little bit more careful with that. But they do show a lot of the indigenous sites. They show things that are of very important interest, but I don't think they're all related to aliens. And I think that takes away from some of the heritage and the legacy that our own ancestors have left us that belong to us. And I think that that gets lost in the mix.
Yeah, I do as well, yeah. Can human consciousness evolve past super quantum computers?
Well, I'm not a scientist. I can't answer that question in the form of a scientist, but I can answer that question in the form of an intuitive. Okay, as an intuitive, my answer to that question is absolutely. In fact, I think quantum computers, as much as they really can just, suck in data and process it all, and I would love to ask a supercomputer questions and see what they really come up with all the data that they have. I mean, think about these large, huge data centers where they collect all the information people put online every single day. That's all going somewhere. It's all got to be sorted somewhere. And they have these huge data collection centers like in Utah, here in the United States, around the world. And they have algorithms that have to search through all this. So I really believe it's reverse engineered alien technology.
Yeah.
And here's why, okay? Going back to when everybody starts at Roswell moves forward, Phil Corso, his father was very well known for bringing information to legacy after he died. They would talk about reverse engineered technology. Lockheed Martin, all these big research and development companies were given little pieces to study. It's how we came up with the laser. It's how we came up with a bunch of other different things. Stephen Greer talks about this a lot, and so do some others. It's this reverse engineered technology stuff has been in since Roswell. Okay, so what have they done with it? Well, then you have CERN pop up within this time frame where the World Wide Web was started. Some say by accident, but I think it was definitely on purpose. Now they're talking about, looking for access or, ways to get into or view alternative dimensions and I mean, but on very, very small scales, biotechnology, nanotechnology, all of this stuff I really believe is reverse engineered alien technology because it has given access to the entire human population. If you were an alien coming from another world and you just happened to discover Earth and all the things that we have here, would you not want to study it? Would you not want to get into the minds and heads of the species of humans and figure out what makes them tick? Well, I think they've done that. And they've done it on the small scale. Jim Mars, who just passed away this week, was one of my greatest. I loved talking to him. He was a phenomenal researcher. He was an award-winning investigative journalist. He talked about aliens. He talked about vaccines, being able to administer microscopic microchips. He talked about how people would become infected with the technology without even knowing it, and it would be sold to us through the flu shot that we have to get every year because we might catch a cold. God forbid human beings catch a cold because naturally that's how we upgrade our biological technology, our normal, natural, right? But if you're not, it's just another reason for them to, come up with it. And there's millions of people in the industries that have no idea that this is even happening. So, if you tell that to a nurse, they might say, what? You need to go talk to a mental doctor. That's paranoia and that's stuff, right? Yeah. But if you really, 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 really do your homework, Bob. You can find your ways to these things in very legitimate sources. And Jim was one of the greats at doing that. And he was able to really give just solid support for his theories and facts. And everybody should go buy all his books now, because I have all of them. I have a full library because, having interviewed him, I got a lot of them from his publisher. But he was extremely adept in navigating the information and connecting the dots, and so was David Icke. I mean, I got into David Icke's work back in the early 2000s before he became really famous and popular. I remember going to see him speak in Mount Shasta. There was maybe 40 people in the auditorium, and now he sells out everywhere. But, there's certain parts of his work I don't really accept 100%, but his connections, his ability to go into the different fields and, like nanotechnology, biotechnology, vaccines, how they're all meant to do. I really think he was onto something, and I think he was right.
Exactly. I think he was as well. Yeah, I remember David Icke as a football commentator when he first started out in sport.
He worked for the BBC.
Yeah, he worked for the BBC. Yes,
yeah. Most people who come out on these things, the BBC produces a lot of people who come out with these things. But David had a background in broadcast. I mean, he had a legitimate career. So why would he come out with all this stuff and just trash that career without having some...
It just changed overnight. 1 minute, and then next minute, it was in a tracksuit and it was like a silky tracksuit. And they're saying there's something wrong with that guy. He's gone over the top, and but it's proved everybody wrong now. Like you said, he started.
I think he's right. I think now early 2000s, now almost 20 years later, we can say with legitimate surety that some of the things that he put out in his whole body of work was actually right on. And, I had a spiritual teacher at the time who I was working with, and she told me to go read his books, and I was just dumbfounded because I couldn't believe she would tell me to go read his books, especially when I opened up the first one, and I was like, what? She wants me to read this? This is awful. And I had the hardest, but because she had told me to go read it in private, I took that as like, this must mean something. So I went and got all his whole work at that time and read it and went through it and got through it. And that's all I wanted to read for the amount of time that I spent going through his body of work. I didn't want to pick up any other book. And then what I did was I looked in his sources, his, what books he got his information from, and I ordered all of those and I read all of those. So, I studied his work for a good couple years getting into all that. I haven't really read any of his newer stuff. Once he started in on the moon, I kind of it didn't resonate with me because it's just not there, I guess. I don't know. And the reptilian theory and stuff is easy to understand in theory, but, I've never seen anybody turn into reptiles, so I can't say that's for sure, right? I mean, we still have to go by some sort of personal experience. But, yeah, I think he was right, and I think we're watching that whole world manifest in its own way, and the agendas are coming out, and we're seeing them clearly. And he definitely hit it on the head, and he's the one that predicted all of this.
He is, yeah. We've about come to the end of the show, Hillary. It's gone so quickly. You're a great guest, as usual. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Bob. It's been fun.
Can you let everybody know where they can find you?
You can find me through my website, HillaryRaymo.com. You can find me on Facebook. I'm pretty active on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter. I'm pretty much all over. And my website has how to reach me on all those. And if you really have something to say to me from the show, please send it through my contact form on my website. I'd be happy to hear your feedback and interact with you on that as well.
Oh, lovely. That's absolutely wonderful. Yes, thank you so much again. I think who's on my show next week, next Wednesday. Show will be Ken Johnson next week, astronaut. Yes, he's on my show next Wednesday, so we'll have a fantastic show next week. Thank you to Susan for being the producer of the show today, and thank you to everybody in the chat room. Bye for now.